Yep. Okay, cool. So hi everyone. My name is Serisha and I am the executive director at Leading in Color. I'm thrilled to be here virtually with you all today. So thank you to Girls Action Foundation for inviting me to teach our Listen Up workshop. Today we'll be learning about how you can get your voice heard in politics, especially during the current pandemic. So I'm currently joining you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin people in Ottawa, but I've spent most of my life growing up in the territories of the Kanekanake Nation in Montreal and Huron territory in the GTA. I invite you all to introduce yourselves and share where you're calling in from in the Zoom chat. And as folks begin to share, I want to ask you to think about why we share this information, particularly acknowledging that Indigenous peoples have long been the custodians and stewards of where we call home, and yet every day their existence is threatened by the Canadian state. For me personally, my family came to this land as refugees, seeking to escape the apartheid government of South Africa, and I grew up here with the privileges afforded by the state as a citizen. Yet it wasn't until I was 22 that I learned that the racist system of apartheid that my family endured was based on the Canadian residential school system. Because of this, I personally feel even more of a conviction to commit to tangible actions of allyship aimed at seeking justice for Indigenous communities and providing support whenever possible. I hope that this is something you will commit to as well as you live, work, and play on these lands. To start off, I'll explain a little bit about what Leading in Color is. We are a community grassroots organization founded in 2019 after I grew frustrated with the rejection of racialized experiences in advocacy spaces. Our goal is to provide young racialized leaders and activists with the necessary tools needed to conduct their advocacy efforts and offer free training in the form of webinars, workshops, and events for young racialized leaders to develop their advocacy skill set. To start off, I'd like to ask you all a question, and please feel free to add your answers into the chat with everybody. But what does getting your voice heard look like to you? Is it having somebody validate your concerns? Is it taking action on a problem that you've raised? How do you know that your voice has been heard? And so I invite you all to add some of those responses to the chat, and I'll give you a few minutes to do so. Oh, and I think I actually can't see the chat while I'm sharing my screen. So maybe if Jen, you can read out some of what folks are saying.
Sure. Rochelle said, when your voice is acknowledged by the person you're trying to communicate your message to.
That's great. I'll give it another few seconds for anybody else to add to their response.
Amanda just shared, I think sometimes it's a feeling seen and feeling validation of my experiences makes me feel like I am being heard. And it looks like taking action in whatever ways you can. Let's see, okay. I believe that my voice being heard means that it is considered when discussing the big picture and making future plans. When there's a tangible action and outcome that happened from your voice. Validating my concerns and then taking action and following up.
Wonderful. Those are all great. So the premise of having our voices heard is quite simply to see the results based on what you've said. We want to raise our concerns or solutions or ideas and have those in power take them seriously, validate them, and then act on them. But who do we go to and how do we get them to listen? As we move through this workshop, keep any questions you have written down or to the side, and there will be a space at the end for you to write them all into the chat as we go along. So the first step to getting your voice heard in politics is to know who you're dealing with. Who represents you and what are they responsible for? In colonial Canada, we have 3 core levels of government: the federal government, for which you are represented by your member of parliament; provincial government, which also has a local representative, though their titles differ per province; and then municipal, where you can find your local city councilors and mayor. These individuals, are elected representatives whose responsibility it is to represent your perspectives, needs, and lived experiences. Each of them have different jurisdictions. So when you have an issue, your first job is to determine which one of them is required to handle it. Sections 91 and 92 of the Constitution Act of 1867 respectively note what the federal and provincial governments are responsible for. Municipal governments, for example, are not included in this, and they are responsible for areas such as libraries, parks, water systems, policing, roadways, and parking. It's important to note as well that the three territories have different governments that are given responsibilities by the federal government. There is also a change when it comes to colonial governance on reserves, which are handled again by the federal government. Additionally, there exist other forms of governance in Canada, such as First Nation band councils and Indigenous governing bodies that are not necessarily recognized by Canada's colonial systems of government. After you've determined who to reach out to, you'll need to figure out what you want them to know and how. There are several ways to do this. Traditionally, in person, you can attend events your representatives are hosting or speaking at, as well as invite them to your own advocacy events. With the current situation that we're in, many of these have shifted online, so you can still attend virtual town halls, fundraisers, constituency events, panels, debates, and more. Participating online in um, Participating online in chat sections and Q&As is also key to getting your voice heard when you're prevented from physically claiming your space. It's also important to take advantage of the digital platforms that you have at your disposal, while exercising some safety and caution with your online presence, including receiving parental or guardian support and supervision for those of you who are minors. You can also ask questions in live Q&As that your representatives do on platforms like Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, and Facebook. You can send them direct messages, tweet at them publicly, and tag them in your posts and hashtags. It might seem like the coronavirus crisis means that your representatives can only deal with that particular subject, but the same way that many of us have been required to continue working or schooling simply in just an adjusted manner, so have they. They're still required to listen, to work, and to support their constituents, and your advocacy work reminds them of this fact. When it comes to your federal representation, or anywhere that you've had a recent election, be sure to tie in your questions and concerns to any election promises that were made. If you're passionate about partisanship, if you're passionate about partisanship, there continue to be opportunities for you to volunteer with your constituency, whether it's virtually in their offices, checking out their website for opportunities, and demonstrating a commitment to creating change with them during this pandemic. Advocacy groups are also a great way for you to gain more backing for your issues. Volunteering with them can help push momentum behind your concerns and add some legitimacy in any demands for action that you have. Lastly, while you may not be able to meet with your representatives in person, you can still request meetings with them and or their staffers, especially as a constituent. Request a video conference or a phone call, and that's where you can talk about your issues in a more personalized setting. So now that you know who to talk to and what to talk to them about, how do we best engage with these policymakers to begin with? Some of these we've gone over, such as volunteering or attending events and requesting meetings. But other tips for engaging with your representatives include finding a connection. Sometimes your representatives may not be politically aligned with your values. And for some, this may be difficult, but for others, it may not. Particularly if your views are the complete opposite, this can become extremely challenging. But as difficult as it is, finding some common ground is always helpful to ease the tension. Maybe you went to the same school, support the same sports team, or something else that ties into your community and your constituency. This can create a foundation for a more productive conversation that enforces for them the need to listen meaningfully to your concerns. And be sure to make sure that you follow up by an email or phone or another online meeting, as always, and always end with a clear ask. And these are some things that we'll go over shortly again. Questions that end with an answer that is yes or no and require a direct response are also really important. For example, do you support X, or will you commit to doing Y? If you're able to meet with your representatives, so via Zoom or any other sort of platform online, There are some key tips to keep in mind to ensure that you get your point across. We've already tackled finding a connection, but what happens if that just isn't possible? Well, challenge them on it. If there's no way getting around your differences, prompt them with questions about why they've taken a particular stance opposite to yours. It's helpful to prepare this in advance of your meeting, so research their positions and voting history on relevant bills or debates that have had to do with your issue area. Bring in some concrete facts and data to support your argument, and develop counter arguments or questions that they might ask you. Contrarily, if you are successful in asking your perspective, or in sharing your perspective with them, rather, applaud them for any work that they've done on the issue and push for more with some specific asks on what you can do to support them, any opportunities they have to collaborate, and ask if there are ways that you can help them push forward this issue. Some other tips that might be helpful to ease any concerns that you have meeting one-on-one with them include working in coalitions or in partnerships. So collaborating with others, usually a max of 3 to 4 people are best for an in-person meeting, but when we switch to online, 2 or 3 people max might be more helpful, and 1 to 2 for a phone conference. It's helpful to keep your points clear and concise, and ensure that you've done your research to speak from a place of authority and confidence. Additionally, again, email them any relevant resources you've created, any information that you put together, and other materials that they should look over to gain more of a perspective on the issue. Their staffers or executive assistants will likely be the ones to look at this, and they'll brief your representative on what it is that you've shared. Lastly, regardless of the platform, be it online or in person, always email a follow-up thank you for your meeting with your representative. Reiterate any asks that you have and summarize your concerns, followed by a request to meet again if you think that that's appropriate. This may seem intimidating, but the most important thing to remember is that this is their job. You're entitled as a constituent to raise your concerns, and they're required to listen to you. And so as a result, at the end of the day, they really are just regular people. And this is something that you can do without sort of this fear and anxiety that they're in a position of power while you're not. So before we move on to the workshop part of this piece, I just want to see if there's any questions folks had. I know that's a lot of information to take in all at once. So if you need anything repeated, do let me know.
So far, no questions.
Okay, cool. So we're going to spend the bulk of this time doing this together and trying it for ourselves in groups. So the first group activity, oh, I think I'm not sharing anymore. Let me just go back to that. There we go. So for the group activity, we're going to divide you up into groups, and you'll list the members in your groups as the first piece. Doesn't have to be a bunch of personal information, just list down your name so that we know who you are. Please pay attention to the number that your group is being assigned. I think this automatically does it on Zoom. And in these rooms, you will collectively edit the corresponding slide in the Google Doc link that I will paste in the chat in just a second. Here you will plan out your own meeting with representatives and write answers to the questions on the slide. Before you begin the activity in your groups, take a minute to introduce yourselves briefly to one another and select someone to be a writer who can fill out the deck for you, 1 or 2 people, as well as somebody, 1 or 2 people to be the presenter who will briefly present your work to the larger group. If you have questions, you can click the click for help button, I believe it's called, and I'll be able to jump in and provide you with any answers. So I'm going to paste the link in the chat.
Anyone have questions before we break into groups? Again, if you're comfortable, you can turn your video on in the small groups. We won't post the recordings of the small groups, so you don't have to worry about that. The link to the Google Doc is now in the chat if you didn't get it or can't see it, just let us know. All right, no questions. Great. So let's get started. I will break us up. Okay, great. So you should receive a request to join the room. Hello. Can you all hear me?
Oh, I don't think I can hear you, Jen.
Oh,
Oh, now I can.
okay, great. Okay. Serisha,
Placed us in the.
yeah, do you want me to move you to a different room?
Yeah, maybe wherever it is that I can see if people click the help button.
Okay, I'll send you to room 3. Okay. I can type the Google Doc if one of you is comfortable presenting. I feel like I shouldn't present since I'm with girl section.
I can present.
Okay, awesome.
So I don't know if you what's your name? Ewan?
Yes.
Okay, maybe you can write down the stuff.
Sure.
Okay.
So select an issue you care about. Are we supposed to be only 3?
No, there are a couple people who haven't accepted the request, it looks like. And we had a few people that left the call, I think, in the last few minutes, maybe because they weren't interested in doing a group activity or who knows. So we'll go with it. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so
What is the issue?
I'm interested in various things. Maybe gender-based violence, mental health. It has to do with women's issues, right?
Yeah, but it can be anything. I think it's all related.
Yeah. Okay.
So
I work in LGBTQ youth agency, so I can see where gender-based violence kind of linked with that issue. So.
okay. So should we do that?
Yeah.
Okay. Gender-based violence. Let me see if I can share my screen. Okay. Identify your representatives. Okay. Yuan, where are you?
I am actually in the United States, but I used to live in Toronto for 20 years.
Okay.
So I know the municipality and how the government works in Canada for sure.
Okay, awesome. I'm actually from the United States, so it's funny. But now living in Montreal.
Right, the opposite.
Okay, so since 2 of us are Montreal, should we just identify those?
I'm from Montreal.
Okay, perfect. So I guess we can look up who our representatives are.
Mine provincial is Ruba Gazal, and then federal is Rachel Bandayan in Liberal, and here in my district in municipal, his name is Richard Ryan.
Okay, if I send you, can I chat you in this breakout room?
Yeah, you could. I think. I'm actually not sure.
I'm trying to figure out how I can make it more interactive.
Did you see my text? It only sends to you two.
I opened the chat, but I think it's like the whole group chat.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't send to everybody. It just sends to us.
Oh, really?
Yeah, if you look, it just sends to the people in this group. You see like what I'm writing in the chat?
Yes. It says from Marine to everyone. So I just wasn't sure if it's everyone, like everyone, or everyone in the group.
No, everyone. It says everyone, but it says everyone in this group, not the whole thing.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. Okay. Planning our meeting. So we need to brainstorm 2 to 3 key points that we can bring up around our chosen topic. So what do you all think? I want to let you lead this.
I guess like violence in the workplace, so like how to address, certain issues that happen in the workplace, or also cyber violence or cyber harcèlement, how to say it?
Cyber harassment?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. Is there a third one you want to add, Yuan?
I mean, since it's gender-based, I'm not sure if it's the place to bring up LGBTQ issues because, yes, we do have gender identity expression, but I don't know how, like, I feel like it diverges a little bit far from the original idea. So what do you all think?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, you
No?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you can say that even though it says gender-based violence, politicians kind of have to think farther out, and it can happen in like specific groups such as the LGBTQ group, immigrants. Even within the LGBTQ group, there's like specific pockets where they get more, like especially like trans women, sex workers, they get it more. So if it's the gender ID, it's like it's not just limited to its name. It can happen in a lot of different groups than just the gender-based violence.
right. Maybe it could be something like something about inclusion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or
I agree.
sex. Oh, it could be also decriminalizing sex work.
Oh yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to send you the link. Okay, so it would be what? Inclusive. Okay, decriminalize sex work. Something around inclusive and intersectional, like policy making or something like that around this specific issue. I mean,
Yeah.
not on every issue, but lensed policy making. Okay, I'm going to share this with you, and you all can edit, change. Oops, I sent it to you privately. Okay.
So, what materials would you send? What advocacy would you do to show them you care? Hello.
Hello.
Hi, I've returned. Sorry, I'm posting the link. I messed it up.
Oh, no worries.
I think this is going to everybody if I send it.
No, it just goes to our group.
Yeah, I'm just going to each individual group to post it. But that one should work now. Sorry.
No worries. All right, perfect. I'm glad that you've been able to go from room to room because I was like, wait.
Yeah, it's working great. I'll leave you to it.
Okay, so we can add copy and paste. Yeah. Okay.
So which group are we?
We are group 1.
Okay.
Well, technically we're in breakout group 2. So never mind. I guess we're group 2.
Group 2. Okay. I think it's can I it's,
Yeah, you can go ahead.
it's just an image like this.
Ah, okay.
We can make it later, the line.
Okay, are you adding? I don't want to work over you.
Oh no, you can go ahead. I think we can just add this after we're done the body of paragraph. That way it can work freely because this is
Okay. Okay. Okay, key points. This is not all gonna fit. And please change anything that isn't representative of what you meant.
I guess for the cyber violence and harassment, it's also how to address it as well.
Okay.
So are there currently rules and regulations in terms of addressing violence in workplace and cyber violence, or are there not?
I don't know. I know that there are like organizations that do, that raise awareness around these issues. But in terms of like policy, I don't know. It's just I know that if you're minor, you can call the police, for example, if you're a victim of cyber violence. But if you're over 18, if you're an adult, it's a bit more like complicated, because if you're a minor, it can be, it can be considered like child pornography or other illegal stuff. Whereas when you're adult, it's always kind of more difficult to find proof, I guess.
So I'm just thinking, like, when we present it to the representative, are we asking them to make the process easier, or are we reducing the barriers and challenges, or are we asking them to enforce more, rewrite their regulation? I'm just thinking out loud.
I don't know if it's possible to send representatives like an amendment. Like, let's say you want to do an amendment to a certain policy or article in this law or whatever. I don't know if it's possible to do that, to do an amendment or add clauses to their policy thing. I think I've done that in the past. I'm not sure. But yeah, amendment and maybe letter to the newspaper and the petition.
Does that make sense?
I guess if this was a real thing, we could have done like actual petition, get signatures, and bring those petitions to the in-person meeting. or show the outcome to the representative and tell them like, look, these are all these people who want amendments, so you should listen to us. Is that how this should go?
It could also be a petition where you sign and then they have to do a consultation. That's what happened in Montreal in 2018. There was a consultation around systemic racism because Ville de Montréal didn't want to do this consultation, and then the youth mobilized like 15,000 people to hold that consultation because systemic racism is still an issue today. So they did the consultation.
What was the follow-up after the consultation? What was the like actions that they decided to do, and did they actually do anything after the consultation? I'm just curious.
They did a report. They did like a research on systemic racism and like trying to find solutions to be more inclusive and stuff like that. And I can't really remember. Oh, I think they have a website now. I don't know.
Okay, so what on here do you all want to change, update? Oh, Maureen, are you presenting? Am I remembering that correctly?
Nope. Oh, yes. Yes.
I guess like no pressure. I'm like, am I making that up or, okay. So I want to make sure the document like makes sense to you and like how you want to explain it. So if you want to edit or add things, like if it'll help you.
Okay, yeah. Then there is what is your ask, what do you want them to commit to? I think the out of the four, that what speaks to me the most is the decriminalized sex work for now. Well, especially in this context, in the COVID context.
I agree.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so that would be the ask.
Yeah, I think it's a good time because there has been reports that there's a lot of domestic violence happening inside the house because everybody's in the house. So I think it's a good timing to ask for these things.
Yeah, and here in Montreal, I volunteer with this organization called Rest to Resist, and they have partnership with the Indigenous Sex Work and Arts Collective, and I learned a lot about their situation. And like they can't really work because of the coronavirus crisis, but they still do kind of under the table, and they can't apply for any government grants and stuff like that. So they're really well, they are poor and they don't have any resources. So right now we're trying to get them basic food and medicine for free delivered to them.
Yeah, makes sense. And in terms of the LGBT community, there's a lot of trans women who rely on sex work, and they're in a similar situation as well. So
yeah.
Great.
Wait, do you volunteer with an organization?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh no, I work at a organization.
Okay, what is the organization?
It's called 1 in 10. It's based 1 and 10.
1 and 10.
Yeah, it's like the N is just the letter N. But it's based in Phoenix, Arizona.
Okay, I'll look it up.
Yeah, it's a LGBTQ youth serving organization. So.
Okay, let me see if we're ready to come back together.
Or would you engage them post-meeting? Oh no, how would you engage them? How would we engage them post-meeting? Emails?
I think, yeah, email is good, phone call is good, but I think having like a follow-up meeting, in-person meeting might be pretty effective.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry, guys. I'm so tired. I keep yawning.
Okay. Don't
No,
worry.
it's okay.
Like 3, 4 p.m. there.
Yeah.
I get it. Like that.
It's so hot in here. Ugh.
Live meeting, phone meeting.
That's one thing I like about Arizona. It's hot, but it's not humid.
Oh, yeah.
So the laundry dries up in like 5 minutes, which is amazing outside.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Everything's so dry. Like my nose is so dry. I'm like,
No,
and
it's never to drive.
I remember Toronto being super sticky during the summer. Ugh.
Did you see my message? Did that go out to everyone?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I maybe will. It's funny. I can move Serisha to our room, but I don't know if she's like mid-sentence, and I don't want to interrupt her. But I just want to ask her, like, are you ready to wrap it up? So.
Well, we saw the message, like, are you ready to go in 3 minutes?
Yeah. Okay. You're right. You're right. I like your background.
You know,
Thanks.
it's nice. Oh.
Have you all been doing many Zoom like types of things like this?
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah. Okay. It's we have like a post-event survey, of course, but I want to make sure that we're getting feedback from people, like folks, about what they actually want, what's helpful, because I also find that people aren't like retaining and taking in information in the same way right now, which is obviously like, of course not during the pandemic. So trying to shape the programming to be, I don't know, to work for with what people are capable of, their energy, their realities in the pandemic has been a challenge. And I think folks are starting to get tired of video conferencing also.
Yeah. I mean, it's been 2 months and like, it's not the same, right? It's not like you're going to an event and socializing with people.
Exactly.
You know, like I don't choose who I want to go to or where I want to go. It's like you're just sitting there and talking.
Yeah.
But it's interesting though, but I don't know. I think I understand why a lot of people aren't really receptive or participating.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close all the rooms and hope that it's not a bad decision.
Oh, it was good talking to y'all.
You too?
Yeah.
Is everyone okay with coming back together, or do folks need more time?
We're a little behind, but I think it should be okay.
Okay, we can also meet back up in small groups for a bit. Serisha, what do you prefer?
I think that group was almost done in particular, or the other groups.
Okay.
Do you guys also need more time?
I think we could use a few more minutes. We kind of rushed through the last couple bullet points.
Okay,
Yeah.
so maybe let's
Putting
do
it in the slide.
like 3 to 5 more minutes, and then
Okay,
do
so
some quick presentations.
okay, I'll bring everyone back at. I'm hoping that it puts you back in the same room. Let me just double check. I'll bring you back in 5. Okay. Okay, so it looks like that worked. Is there anything else that you want to talk about with the activity? Anything that we should add? Oh, wait, I can't hear you. I just realized.
Oh, I was muted.
Oh, okay, I was like, wait.
What? Yeah, no, I don't know, like fast like that. I don't know. It's just, I guess it kind of like depends. Right now, that's why I said decriminalize sex work, because I'm closer to that and kind of aware of the issue and the urgency of it, especially right now.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be the issue, the point, and it affects a certain part of the population, like the indigenous, queer, trans, and people of color. And there's still a lot of stigma around it. Now, for that, I guess, yeah, petition and kind of like creating amendments to the law and like putting pressure on the government by communicating with our representatives about it, and maybe the Ministry of Conditions Féminines, of women's right or something. Just doing our research as well.
Yeah.
I'll be right back. I have to go grab some water.
Okay, no problem.
Sorry, I had to take care of something at work.
Oh, no worries. Maureen just went to get a glass of water. So
Okay.
we're just making sure that we're set up for the conversation. We're coming back in a couple minutes though, so hopefully everyone's ready. So you live in LA?
No, I live in Arizona.
I'm sorry, I don't know why I thought that.
But LA is pretty close.
I was just talking to someone the other day. I was in my backyard and they were wearing a hat of a US sports team, and I was like, they're wearing the Washington sports team hat, and I'm from DC, so I was like, don't see that every day, and they were from LA, so I think that's. But anyway, cool. I've never been to Arizona.
Yeah, it's just like 5 hours drive from LA, but there's really nothing here except for campus.
Do you miss Toronto ever?
I do.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up there, so I do miss it a lot.
Yeah. I haven't been still. I was planning to visit I've only been in Montreal for 2 years, almost 3 now. And I haven't done much traveling like around Canada, partially because it's extremely expensive.
Weird, yeah.
Yeah. But I was supposed to go to Toronto in April, and then obviously that got canceled. So still haven't seen it. But I love Montreal, so.
Montreal's really nice.
Yeah. And Maureen, were you born and raised here?
Yeah.
Cool.
I'm studying at university at UQAM.
Okay.
I live here with my sisters. Most of my family lives in Asia.
Okay.
And I'm studying communications.
Cool.
And I'm hearing a lot.
UQAM's a nice campus. I remember walking in there. Beautiful there.
I have how do we call it? A poster of girls' action. I'm gonna try to see if you can see it. No.
What does it say?
Whoopsie. Wait, I'm gonna disable it.
Oh, I love it.
I love that. An intern that we had 2 years ago did that illustration. She was great. I love that.
Yeah. I have a bunch of women posters.
Amazing.
Okay, I just let everyone know that we're coming together in a minute. So I will see you back in the main room.
I don't know how much, if we have time to do a quick presentation or if we need to wrap up.
I think we can do quick presentations. Do you have time? We did 5-minute presentations.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, great.
Okay, so let's start with whoever was selected for group 1.
Awesome. Hi, so our group was Amanda here, Rochelle and Alessia, and I think Lillian as well, but she wasn't able to be in our breakout room the second time around. If my group members want to chime in and like jump in, I'll actually start us off and then yeah. So our issues that we decided to talk about were affordable, accessible housing. And when we were kind of snowballing this idea, things came up like rent control from the level of housing subsidies, especially with relating to COVID-19 and how a lot of people have not been able to work. Buying restrictions was something that came up, kind of talking about Vancouver and how houses were sitting vacant because they were being bought by foreign buyers. And then also funding support for grassroots and nonprofit organizations that work in these spaces were some things we talked about.
So we also looked at like a long-term strategy. So a lot of the time when people start talking about housing, they're looking at shelters. And so while that's important, we'd also want to look to making a push to like end homelessness and have affordable housing for all. Also looking into things such as a basic income supplement, advocating for intersectional and lived experiences to speak on the issues, and that gives them that space at the table to talk about what's going on with them.
Then we also talked about what we'd want to do if we planned a meeting for with our members or the representatives in each province, which happened to be a minister for Alberta and Ontario. And we discussed potentially having a roundtable to discuss the issues. We also talked about having a survey and trying to see how many people are affected by the issue of housing within the area. Social media campaigns to kind of, share the issue and share the facts so people know what's happening. And then also having call-ins and writing letters to ministers and MPPs who have a voice on the issue.
Yeah, so I'll jump in to talk about our second slide. So some of the things that we discussed as being our ask, or what we would want our representatives to commit to, were potentially coming up with like a new commitment to end homelessness after there was one that ended in 2018 that was set in 2008. There was a couple Albertans in our group. I'm one of them, but I'm not sure if that was an Alberta thing or if it was a national thing or campaign, but maybe setting some new goals. Seeking support for our issues through media representation and official words of support, as well as potentially having an inquiry on affordability and accessibility on a national level that could be translated down to the provincial and municipal levels for analysis.
And then for engaging our representatives post-meeting, doing personal thank yous and follow-ups. So like immediately following up, meeting with them, doing a thank you. And then we're talking about a 1 year down the road saying, hey, we met on this issue. We just want to know what your progress is to date on it. And asking for those updates throughout their commitment. And then looking at different media campaigns, whether it's putting a newspaper article of what we found in our study, what politicians committed to and where we're at, and how far we have to go, or email campaigns, hashtags, etc. And that's it, I think, unless I missed anything from the group.
That's wonderful. Great job.
We forgot to include our list of representatives, so I put it in the speaker notes for slide 1.
Okay, cool.
Awesome.
Were there any questions that came up while you guys were doing this? If so, you don't have to ask them now. You can send them to me later or post them in the chat. But just something for other groups to flag as well if you have any questions for me to answer before that.
Thank you.
Cool. So now we'll go on to group 2.
Hello. So our issue that we choose is gender-based violence. It's me, Ewan, and Jen. And our representatives, or well, my representatives at least, are Rachel Bendayan in the federal level, Ruba Gazal in the provincial level, and Richard Ryan in the municipal level. And there are like 4 subjects or key points that we found, let's say, around gender-based violence, and those are, so 1, reviewing existing policies related to combating various forms of violence. So it could be like violence at the workplace, violence online. So then we talk about like cyber harassment and violence via social media, internet, and stuff like that, and how to address that. That we have applying on an inclusive and an intersectional lens to policy making. One person in our group works in a QTI, LGBTQ organization, and me too, actually. I volunteer in a QTI BIPOC initiative and projects here in Montreal, so that's something that we had in common, and I wanted to bring that forward to create a more inclusive and intersectional society. And lastly, to decriminalize sex work. And so how we're gonna go about that, basically, so what yeah, so we talked about several things. Perhaps maybe a petition demonstrating widespread community support. So a petition, let's say, if this person, there's a targeted person who, you know, talks to young women and we know the name, and we have to do an investigation, or I don't know, some event that happens, or some policy that isn't working or isn't inclusive. Well, then we would do a petition to show that there's like a lot of, like, hundreds of thousands of people who are against it, and then the government would have to do either a consultation or, you know, do a meeting to kind of like change the law and stuff like that. And then we have showing data or research around the increases in domestic violence during the global pandemic. So that's more on the research, just to show how big the impact is and how there are gendered impacts of the COVID-19 crisis. And our ask, like what we want them to commit to, which we found more like kind of urgent right now, is to decriminalize sex work, because there are a lot of sex workers who obviously don't have a job and can't really apply for government grants and don't have really resources, and are reliant on the community, on the organizations that kind of like cater resources for them. And it would be through a meeting. So how we would engage with them, well, post meeting, I mean, would be to do a follow-up in person or via like video conference, to see if they acted upon our ask, and if there is like progress around that decriminalization, and if there's a clause or an article in the law or something. So yeah.
Wonderful. That's great. That's a very distinct and clear ask. Like, will you decriminalize sex work or commit to it? Yes or no? Very good. All right. Any questions that came up in your group? Feel free to put them in the chat or mention them. Otherwise, we'll move on to group 3.
Yeah, sorry guys, both my members left. So we originally started with climate change or climate justice and women, but then we changed it to climate change and health. So we identified the representatives at federal, provincial level, and then also spoke about the local Indigenous Governing Council, and I believe the local MP in BC is Jagmeet Singh, and we spoke about that specifically because of the pipeline that's being built. So in terms of the key issues, we spoke about the health of the communities that the pipeline is going through, the content and autonomy of those communities, and the impact on the environment. And then in terms of the materials that we would send, we spoke about petitions, and like we also just spoke about boycotting and using like notes and impact statements to drive those through, although we wouldn't necessarily take them as materials. And in terms of our asks, we asked that they would commit to providing Indigenous groups and councils with more representation and autonomy in the decision-making process, to ask whether or not the local MPs support the implementation of the pipeline, and if they could commit to not putting the pipeline in or repurposing those finances. And in terms of our post-meeting, we said a nice way to follow up would be to spread the petition to other MPs around the country, so that they would, to show that there's more people against it. And Serisha was saying to us that there's, I think, a law or something that allows for multiple MPs to then present that in Parliament. Yeah.
Wonderful. I guess I'll pass it back to Jen now.
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Serisha. This was excellent and just a really important conversation, always, but really given the context and folks, wondering, like you said in the beginning, is COVID-19 the sole issue that my representatives are focused on, and how can I draw attention to the things that continue to be important to my community?